Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, this afternoon, we're on to D. Now, there's not a huge amount of distilleries beginning with D to choose from, and I thought it's probably about time that we looked at Deanston. Now, as you might remember, a number of episodes ago I did an episode of the show on what I called the axis of evil, which is those kind of distilleries that, shall we say, produce a pretty grim style of whisky. And I have to say that Deanston is one of those whiskies that I kind of lump into that group. Now, I know there'll be people that disagree with me on this one. I know there are people that love that kind of character of whisky, but it's... Anyway, I'm going to explain why I think what I think about Deanston, but before we get any further, it's a little bit of history. I mean, Deanston apparently was an ex-weavery built in, I think it was the 1785 in actual fact, according to the book, but was converted into a distillery in 1965. Apparently a lot of the distillery buildings are brand new, but it looks like a factory to me, it has to be said. And it kind of comes down to something I've said quite a number of times, is that a lot of the time that the character of a malt seems to sort of have some kind of correlation between what the actual distillery looks like. I know that's not always the case. I mean, you take, for example, something like Edredor, which I'll probably do next week because it's the only distillery beginning with E, and it produces quite a pleasant, lovely kind of spirit, and the distillery is picturesque and lovely and nice, and you know. And then you have distilleries like Dufftown and Deanston that look like industrial buildings, and what they produce is just an industrial spirit, you know. I mean, there probably are other distilleries that look pretty, you know, produce pleasant whiskey, but you know. Anyway, I'm not saying it's not pleasant whiskey, it's just not my style of whiskey, and like I said, I'll go into the reason why. Apparently, according to the book, the master blender and director Ian McMillan wanted to recreate the original character of Deanston when he took over, whenever that was. And apparently uses low gravity worts, longer fermentation, slower distillation, and gets a more fruity and estery spirit. I can't say I quite agree with that, but you know, we'll obviously get onto that in due course. Anyway, not really a great deal else to say about the distillery, to be bluntly honest with you, apart from, like I said, it looks like a factory. So let's crack on and I'll introduce this afternoon's sort of lineup. Now, one of the reasons I didn't do probably the most well-known distillery beginning with D, i.e. Dalmore, is because I just don't have the samples, not of the distillery bottlings, because I just don't get the opportunity to taste them. I tasted them a few times, and the only one I really like is a 12-year-old. And there was a couple of others I thought I could have done. Dallywayne, I got plenty of that. Could have even done Dufftown as well, but I thought, you know, I've got a nice mixture of bottlings from Deanston, 3 of which are from the distillery range, which were entered into this World's Whisky Awards, and we will kick off with the 12-year-old, which is bottled at 46.3, as it is owned by Burns Stewart. And Burns Stewart bottle everything at 46.3. So that's the 12-year-old. Next bottling we'll be looking at is the Virgin Oak. Now, doesn't have an age statement. I believe it's aged in American oak to start off with, and then finished in Virgin Oak. So I'm guessing, cynical head here, trying to add some extra sort of oak character to kind of counterbalance the industrial nature of the spirit. We'll see if that one works. Third bottling we'll be looking at, again from the distillery range, is the Toasted Oak, which is aged in re-toasted, or re-charred I should say, American oak barrels. It is then aged in these barrels for 9 years, and then spent another 6 years in ex-whiskey casks, whatever that means. Judging by the character and having tasted before, I imagine some of those casks are probably sherry, although, you know, aging in sort of brand new oak will give you quite a heavy character, heavy colour, as you know from bourbons, so recharring the barrel. You know, they've probably sort of scraped out the inner layers, recharred it. You can get that kind of character, and you also get some really aggressive tannins and sort of some pretty forced wood notes, should we say. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on with that one. Then we've got two independent bottlings to look at. The first we will look at is an 18-year-old bottled by Hunter Laing. It was distilled in April 1996 and bottled in April of last year, and thus bottled at 50% as per usual. So that should be quite interesting to compare with the 12-year-old, the distillery bottling. And finally we'll be looking at a Douglas Laing Old Particular bottling, 20-year-old, bottled at 51.5, distilled in June of 1994 and bottled again in September of last year. Like I said, 20 years old. So it's quite interesting. You just don't see very much in the way of independently bottled Deanston about, and I think in all of the years I've been in the whisky industry now, I've only ever tasted 3, and these 2 happened to come in last year, it has to be said. So anyway, I guess that's enough waffle. Let's let's start the post-mortem then, shall we? Right, okay, doctor, let's see what the patient gives us. It's hard. It's got that really hard barley, herbal. I mean, there's some fruit, yeah, I'll give it that. But you know, when someone says to me it's estery, it's fruity, you know, you're expecting sort of pineapples, apricots, and citrus fruit, and there ain't a lot of it there. It has to be said. It's got some almost cardboardy spice, some gritty, grainy tannins, a bit of coffee, a little bit of licorice, a lot of herbal notes. I mean, I would guess that maybe, and certainly looking at the colour, I would expect there's probably some refill sherry casks here at work, because it certainly has that kind of refill sherry kind of character. Not a lot of vanilla, not a lot of softness. It's, I mean, workhorse spirit is probably not the right way. It probably is actually the right way. It's a workhorse spirit. It is just kind of hard. It's not joyful, fruity, exuberant. It's not, none of those kind of things. It's just kind of really hard. Oh, getting a little bit of vanilla now if I sniff hard enough. Palate. That's a bit bitter on the finish. Again, there's a little bit of fruit, there's a little bit of vanilla, there's a little bit of softness, but not enough softness. Again, it's that hard barley character, that sort of intense industrial kind of character. It's got a bit of softness at the edge, but bitterness of that oak. I mean, that really is heavy going. It's got a little sort of bruised cider apple finish, a little bit of aceticness, which is probably coming from the stills. I'm guessing that it's just the shape of the stills that has probably given it that kind of character, but it's not one that I would say is a pretty malt, shall we say. Right, moving swiftly on to the Virgin Oak. Let's see if a little bit more oak character kind of softens the edges then, shall we? Actually, it's completely the opposite. I mean, what oak? I mean, well, it's a bit of grainy, herbally, but it's really young. I mean, I would guess this is not much older than about 8 years old. It's got that slightly off the still kind of character, that oiliness. Again, that hard barley. Really not a great deal else, it has to be said. This is not exactly the most complex of spirit. I mean, Virgin Oak, I would have expected a little bit more vanilla. But it's just, there's just virtually no oak here at all. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a little bit sort of at the edges, and it's a little bit, and again, no fruit, not a great deal of anything really, it has to be said. Palate. Herbally, almost got a rye-like character actually, which could be the sort of interaction of the sort of like herbal notes and the virgin oak possibly. It's green, it's got a green kind of oak finish. Softer, again, it's probably got a little bit of a better balance. Yes, it has again that hard kind of character, and there's a little bit of fusty spice notes, but again, really dry, tannic, not so bitter now, or certainly not as bitter as the 12-year-old, but still no softness, no vanilla, no anything like that to balance it. It's just sort of like, yeah. Okay, so moving swiftly on to the toasted oak. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. It's quite smoky, dense oak, charred, charcoal, a little bit of sherry dried fruit. No distillery character, thank God. I mean, this is all about the different casks going on here. I mean, it's like, again, slightly herbal. It's got that almost rye-like note again. Lots of sherry coming out now. I'm getting lots of dried fruit, prune, walnut, that kind of stuff. And again, that sort of charcoaly, charred character. So I suppose in essence you could say, well, it's worked, you know, it shows what happens when you sort of, you know, aggressively rechar a cask, you know, you get this aggressive kind of charred note, which is not unappealing, it has to be said. I mean, I can't smell any distillery character, which, like I said, is, in my opinion, quite a good thing. So, palate. A little bit of bitterness in the spice on the finish, but actually quite nicely spicy. Again, I'm getting the kind of toasted, charred character coming through on the finish, but it's again primarily all sherry cask. It's all prunes, walnuts, raisins, fruitcake. I mean, when I tasted this blind for the World Whisky Awards, I would not have guessed that this had been aged in. Or spent sort of like most of its time in recharred American oak casks, because all I can taste is sherry. Very clean sherry, it has to be said. A little bit metallic now on the aftertaste, but again, no real distillery character. It's all cask, and so far probably the most enjoyable of the three. Okay, so moving on to the independent bottlings, the single cask bottlings. Let's have a look at the 18-year-old then, shall we? Oh yes, that's kind of Deanston, isn't it? Slightly rubbery and fainty, cardboardy. Now, it's not bad. There's nothing wrong with the spirit. This is how Deanston is, and it reminds me of Dufftown, it reminds me of Tobermory. It has that oily, I mean, you wouldn't have picked this for 18. I mean, it really does not smell like an 18-year-old. It's got that high-toned, almost off the still kind of character, the hard barley, I'm getting some creamy vanilla coming through now, which is just trying to balance out the industrial notes. And actually, I think that's quite succeeding, to be honest with you. And I think here, this is the key with these kind of malts like Dufftown, etc., that have this industrial kind of character, you want something else to sort of give it something balance. You want some sweetness, you know, or maybe some winey notes if you've finished it in a wine cask or something like that. Just something to kind of counterbalance it. But when, you know, you've got nothing else, which this doesn't have, admittedly, it's got a little bit of oak coming through. It's all just really hard going, and certainly, you know, when it's young and oily and fainty and off the still and all that kind of stuff, you know, it's like, God. So this is very indicative of Deanston, that the nose this particular bottling, again, it's not exactly a style I favour, but it's kind of classic of its type, shall we say. Palate. Actually, that's not bad palate. It's a lot sweeter in granulated sugar, some caramel, some toffee, which is thankfully all coming up first, and now I'm getting the distillery character coming through on the finish with that slightly hard, lightly metallic kind of character. But the oak is all still there, you know, still giving a little bit of creaminess and a balance. And so, as far as I can see, this is the best balanced of all of the bottlings so far. It, like I said, it has something other than just the industrial character of the spirit. Still won't want to drink it though, but you know, or stock it, but you know, as far as Deanston goes, I don't think it's too bad at all. And finally on to the 20-year-old, bottled at, what was this bottled at? 51.5. So let's see if this is the equal of the Hunter Laing bottling. Probably the casks were bought probably roughly about the same sort of time. So let's see what the nose goes to say. Quite similar to the Hunter Laing in actual fact, but less oak. It's again really hard, a little bit fainty, quite herbal. And that seems to be, that is it. That there you have the sort of like the Deanston character in a nutshell: industrial, herbal, and a little bit fainty. I'm really selling this to you, aren't I? Not a lot else. It's a little bit soapy. There's a bit of citrus possibly. Again, 20 years old. I mean, if this is what it's like at 20, this will just age for 100 odd years and probably stay exactly the same. You know, it'll be sort of like the, you know, cryogenically frozen whiskey, I imagine. You know, I mean, I'm getting no maturity in notes at all. There's no sort of old oak. There's no sawdust. There's no, yeah, you would expect that from, you know, whiskey of this kind of age, and it's just kind of almost as fresh as a daisy. It's incredible, really. It has to be said. Yeah, there's a bit of sweetness coming out now, a little bit of honey possibly, but that kind of hard barley and spice kind of notes are sort of starting to come up as well, and yeah, there's a bit of oak. Palate. Well, there's quite a lot of creamy oak on that. It's got a very soft palate, which is amazing in this instance. But again, I don't know, distillery character is a little bit of hardness on the finish, a little bit of granite in actual fact coming through. I mean, it is a Highland distillery after all. But it doesn't really taste them an awful lot at all. It's very short, vapid. It's kind of, maybe that's it. Maybe Deanston doesn't develop any particular aged character. It just goes and dies, you know, with serious age. Yeah, there you go. Right, okay, so let's sum this sort of tasting up. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be making any friends in Deanston whatsoever. I'll probably get some nasty emails saying, what the hell are you saying about our whiskey? But, you know, it is what it is, which is a phrase I've kind of used an awful lot of the time when it comes to whiskey. If you like that style, and there are some people that love it, I'm just never going to be one of those kind of people. Not when you think about the huge array of whiskies that there are available on the market. Why drink something that's in actual fact pretty hard work? You know, it's like, yeah, this is not enjoyable. This is just getting through it, you know. 12-year-old, yeah, alright, it's got some sherry character, but it's kind of, you know. Virgin Oak, well, that's not very old at all. I mean, I'm not getting a great deal of oak character whatsoever. It's all fainty and young, and you know, again, it's Deanston. The Toasted Oak, well, some bloody sherry, really. I mean, yeah, all right, I'm getting some of the recharred oak character, the sort of like the smokiness, the char, that kind of thing. But there's no distillery character, so in essence, I'm guessing that this is actually probably the best bottling of the whole lot, because you can't taste any spirit character, which is good. No, to be fair, I think probably my favourite of them has got to be the OMC bottling. It's certainly got some oak that gives it some creaminess, some vanilla, and a bit of sweetness, which kind of, like I said, stands up to the industrial character of the spirit. So, so far the best of the bunch, I think. And the old particular, well, you know, it kind of had an interesting nose, might have been going somewhere, but I'm afraid the palate was a bit. Yeah, it didn't really go anywhere at all, it has to be said. So there you go. Yeah, if you want to sort of berate me for my opinions on this, feel free, go ahead. You know, again, it's just my opinion, and it's probably not going to sort of change the world, is it? Let's be honest with you. But like I said, it's kind of like a why. And this is exactly the reason why I've lumped it in the axis of evil, it has to be said, because it is just not a pretty spirit. It's kind of never going to win any great awards as far as I can see. It just doesn't have any real charm at all, to be honest with you. And yeah, you're probably thinking, oh, you're being really, really hard on that. And yeah, I am. I'm kind of being hard on it because, you know, that's my job. You know, I'm a critic, review. You know, and like I say, at the end of the day, it's just one man's opinion. So, so go ahead. You know, grab yourself a bottle of the 12-year-old. See what you think. You know, you may well love it. You may well think exactly the same as I do, that it's pretty rough and ropey old stuff. So. There you have it. That's Deanston for you. You know, lovely distillery, and I'm sure the people who work there are lovely people, and I'm sure it's, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to drink it. That's to be said. Anyway, good dramming. Good afternoon.
E ora